Nestled deep within the dense jungles of Guyana, what began as a utopian dream envisioned by a charismatic leader ultimately descended into unspeakable horror. How could hundreds of people place their trust in one man to such an extent? They uprooted their lives, moved to a different country, and diligently followed his commands. Today we delve into the chilling psychology behind the Jonestown Massacre, exploring the dynamics of power, persuasion, and blind loyalty that led to one of the darkest chapters in human history, and the dangers and the origin of the quote, drinking the Kool-Aid. Jim Warren Jones, most known as Jim Jones, was born May 13, 1931, a Taurus, is the only child to parents James Jones and Lynette Pultman, living in Crete, Indiana. James Jones, the father, was a disabled World War I veteran and a victim of a gas attack in the war, and was therefore living off of disability payments, causing him and his family to struggle financially during the Great Depression. Now, I'm assuming the mix of the dad being in the war and suffering injuries from the war led him to being an alcoholic and not as present in the lives of his wife and son. Now, the mom, Lynette, she was a bit of a rebel. She didn't want kids, which during this time seemed to be the only thing a woman was supposed to do. Stay home, have kids, and she didn't have strict religious beliefs as well. Lynette was described as having eclectic spiritual beliefs, often blending elements of various religious traditions. She was known for her interest in the paranormal and the occult. She believed in reincarnation and claimed to have psychic abilities. Lynette also talked about her visions and prophetic dreams. She was a nonconformist and critical of organized religion, which she viewed as hypocritical and corrupt. Along with her not wanting to be a mom, having complex spiritual beliefs, she also worked long hours as well, which was uncommon for women at this time, going along with her rebellious spirit. So she wasn't as present in Jim's life as well, along with his father. It's shared that she didn't have maternal instincts, so she just worked and stayed to herself for the most part. From my perspective, it seems like everyone that we're talking about just wanted some type of escape. Father being a veteran, being a victim of an attack, his escape was alcohol. The mom not wanting to be a mom, her escape was working long hours, of course, to provide for her family, but just to have a literal escape from the house as well. Now you may be wondering, okay, so what is Jim Jones' escape? Jim was an avid reader, so books were his escape. He found interest in social justice and religious texts. He was particularly influenced by stories of leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, Karl Marx, and Joseph Stalin. Along with the interest in religion, Jim also had a fascination with death. There are some reports that suggest he occasionally conducted mock funerals for the animals, demonstrating a morbid fascination with death and control over life. So let's fast forward a bit. The family moved from Crete, Indiana to Richmond, Indiana, but that didn't make them more of a family unit. The isolation continued. The dad was sick and an alcoholic. The mom was a workaholic, leaving Jim to himself majority of the time, and he said he didn't feel love or like his parents even wanted him around or even noticed he was there, which led him to dive even deeper into his escape: books, religion, religious leaders. He would frequently attend different churches, absorbing various religious practices and teachings. So Jim was so captivated by the ceremonies that he would conduct his own mock religious ceremonies with other children, mimicking what he heard the pastor say, and I'm gonna go over, whatever pastor voice that they use. He was mimicking that. Now this did bother some of the parents of the students, because they're like, who is this young boy? Why is he mocking the pastor? He shouldn't be mocking a religious leader. Like, what's going on? But one parent that did not mind what was going on was Jim Jones' mom. His mom did not care. His mom encouraged his intellectual pursuits, fostering an environment where he felt free to explore radical ideas. But the parents in the community were alarmed by Jones's action, because it just seemed so weird to have a young person doing this. The idea of a child performing such serious and morbid ceremonies was deeply disturbing. This caused Jim to experience isolation at school as well, and not just at home. And this followed him throughout his academic career, because the isolation got even worse when he went to high school. Now Jim is a student at Richmond High School, right? Jim had this thing where he would wear his Sunday's best to school. I'm talking freshly pressed white button-ups, slacks, hard bottoms, the whole nine, on a regular Tuesday with no event going on at school, while everyone else is wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Some may dress up a little more for picture day, but not Jim. He was decked out every single day. And I'm assuming this is because in his free time after school, he would sit at different churches just to see what they were preaching about. So maybe he just wanted to come to school already dressed and ready so he could head straight there. He studied the pastor, how they were delivering the messages, how the congregation was reacting, just observing and taking notes. This was all an attempt for him to find the right religion and denomination for him. Then he would take this information, all the notes he took and gathered, and go preach to the public at shopping centers, popular areas in town. That's where he would pull up his imaginary pulpit and get to preaching. So this was not Jim's only hobby in school. He played sports as well. Well, I shouldn't say played, he more like led sports. He wasn't necessarily good at any sports, but he was good at gathering a team for them to play the sport. So he'll be like, okay, you on base, you catcher, you pitcher, but he wouldn't actually play anything himself. He would more like delegate and tell other people what to do, which we will see this is something that he tends to do quite often a little later in the story. He had a good way of delegating work and making sure everyone was doing their part to make sure the work was done properly and his team would win. So along with preaching and leading sports in high school, Jim got a job because, like I stated earlier, his family was struggling financially. So to help out, he got a job at Reed Memorial Hospital in Richmond, Indiana, where he was an aide helping with a variety of tasks. But the area he felt he was top notch in, and he just felt like he would show out each time, was helping moving dead bodies and amputated limbs. Anything dealing with dead or removed body parts, that's where he felt like he thrived, he felt most comfortable, and he felt excited to go to work. Like, oh, I'm gonna work with the dead people today. How exciting is that? But this piqued his interest in the medical field. So while working at the hospital, Jim met this beautiful young lady that was currently a nursing student there by the name of Marceline Baldwin, who later became Jim Jones's wife. They got married in the early 1950s, and Marceline's background in nursing would later be significant in their work together later on in life. When they got married, Marceline was under the impression that she was marrying a Christian man. I mean, he was going to church every 5 minutes. I'm sure we all assume so far that he is Christian, but over time they began to bump heads on their spiritual and religious beliefs, and Jim stated that he did not believe in her God. Whoever her God was, I'm not sure, but she decided, I'm sure over time our beliefs will mesh together. We'll find out it's probably all the same thing in the end. He'll understand me, I'll understand him. But the difference in beliefs didn't stop Jim from taking his wife to church, and the wife noticed that he would mostly take her to black churches because he found them most comforting. He liked the delivery, he liked the dramatics, the art that comes along with it. It's almost like a performance. People running around, hooting and hollering, passing out. He just loved, y'all know that everything that comes with the black church, he was living for it. He found black churches to be a little bit more interesting than the white ones because he felt like those come across a little bit stiff, boring. It seemed like everybody just went there just to say that they went there. Where like the black churches, like they were hyped to go there. It was more passion, charismatic. The preaching styles were different. He just liked the delivery and how everyone idolized the pastor in black churches. Jim even adopted a preaching style that blended elements of Pentecostalism and social justice rhetoric, which resonated with the black congregation. He loved it so much that he became a member at Laurel Street Tabernacle, which was affiliated with the Disciples of Christ denomination. This experience deeply influenced Jones's approach to ministry and social activism as he embraced the civil rights movement and advocated for racial integration and equality within his congregation and the broader community, and became a student pastor there at the Laurel Tabernacle Church at the age of 21 in 1952. So with Jim being a natural born leader, he eventually wanted to open up his own church, which he did after a year of being a student preacher. He wanted to have full control of what he wanted to preach, the delivery, when he could preach, how often, how long. He wanted to be able to dictate all of that and not have someone tell him, okay, so every third Sunday you got 30 minutes. He didn't want that. He wanted every Sunday I got 3 to 6 hours. So let me just open up my own church. Jim Jones officially opened his own church, initially called the Community Unity Church, in the mid 1950s in Indianapolis, Indiana, where he was the pastor and his wife filled the role as First Lady, of course, but also as secretary during doing administrative work. Jim's early ministry focused on integrating his congregation and advocating for social justice, but this made the church very popular and attracted a lot of people to the point where Jim needed a bigger space for his church. It was getting jam-packed. People didn't have a place to sit. Everyone was shoulder to shoulder. It was getting hot. He needed a bigger location, but he didn't know how to go about it. The offering plate wasn't sky high because the church was located in the low-income community, and he knew his congregation didn't have that much money to spare, so he had to get creative, or he had to get clever on how he was going to gather the money so he could get a bigger location. And the reason why his church was so popular, mainly with African Americans, is because he was promoting integration and equality. And this is what Black people needed and wanted to hear. And they wanted to be in a space that they felt was safe, knowing like, hey, our pastor knows our struggle. He wants us to have equality. He's actually doing the groundwork to prove that this is what he truly believed in. So with the African Americans feeling safe there, the white people who wanted equality as well, everyone felt like it's safe for me to be here, and I don't have to face the harsh reality of the world. When I'm in these doors, I feel safe. We all are one. So going back to gathering the coinage that Jim needed for a new church. Now, one of the most popular ways Jim collected money was by performing miracles. Yes, Jim Jones turned himself into Jim Jesus, walk on water Moses, whoever did what in the Bible Jones. So Jim Jones claimed to perform faith, healing, and other miracles as part of his ministry in the church. And this was the start of a cycle of manipulation. So let's go more into the miracle work. He started small. He started very small with little small miracles. So he would take a member out the audience. I keep calling the audience. You guys will hear me call the congregation an audience just because he was so performative, and you will see throughout this story. So I'm going to say audience, congregation, his followers, the people that were in the church. So he would take a member of the church, call them up, and he knows like, oh, you've been suffering with a headache. I know the pain. I'm so sorry, but I command this headache to disappear. And the member of the church would be like, oh my gosh, I don't feel the headache anymore. I never felt this much peace in years. Oh, thank you, Jim Jones.
You're not able to see me clearly. Things just a blur to you. You have to stumble around lately through crowds and are not able to see even people's faces close up to you clearly.
That's true.
You've told me nothing about your condition. Is that correct?
No, I haven't.
Give that little sweetheart a little bit of love. Thank you, baby. Peace. Take your glasses off. Let's just dare in our faith. We've seen Sister Brown here, who was blind, totally healed. We saw one of our sisters blind from her childhood. It could be hysterical blindness, whatever. We're not concerned. She was blind and could not see. Now, look at my face. I'm going to hold up some fingers. You concentrate hard. I love you. The people love you. And most importantly, Christ loves you. What do you see? How many fingers?
3.
One finger. You don't even need your glasses, child. Let's all be thankful as she cries back there. Let's cry and rejoice with her.
And so everyone would be so impressed, like, oh my gosh, Jim Jones took away this lady's headache. Jesus must be in the room. Let me pull out my wallet and add more money to the collection plate because Jesus is here. Jesus is with us. Jesus is a healer. So that would get people amped up to donate more. So Jim Jones, therefore, was able to pocket more. And then word spread around town. Listen, at the community unity, we got Jesus in the building. Okay, I don't know about you at your church, but we got Jesus in our building. He performing miracles. He getting rid of headaches. He getting rid of back pain. He getting rid of sicknesses. You need to come on over if you got a problem, because he a miracle worker, so he gonna heal you.
Edie? Are your fingers numb? In your right hand? Having enormous headaches in your head?
Yes.
Reach your hands out. Reach your hand out to me. reach the fingers out that are bothering you. Now, is the pain gone?
The theatrics got the people going, the money flowing, so much that he visited other churches performing the same healing miracles. But he knew these other churches weren't familiar with him, so he had to figure out how to keep up the act. So he got a few of his close friends to sit in on the services as actors. He would have his friends come in and they would say, "Oh, Pastor, may you please help this pain in my left foot. I can't walk straight." And then the next thing you know, bippity boppity boo, Pastor Jim Jones would command the pain to go away. And suddenly the once crooked walking man is now walking straight in front of everyone due to the power of not Jesus, but of Jim Jones.
Bless your heart. Take that step.
And she takes this real slow, shaky step. She said, "I can feel it." And he says, "Now I want you to walk toward me."
Move forward. Move forward. Move forward, darling. You can do it.
And he would keep this up. Like, let's just say he had a friend who was pregnant, but she wasn't showing. He'll say, "Hey, can you go in there and you tell the people that you having a problem having a baby?" And then 2 months from now, they're going to see you pregnant. They're going to be like, "Oh my God, Jim Jones did that." While this is going on, Jim Jones is making more and more money and was finally able to get a new home for his church, which this location was previously a Jewish congregation. It's rumored that the word temple was already engraved in stone of the building. So he was like, and let's just keep it, and we shall call this place the People's Temple. So the church, once named Community Unity, was now the People's Temple, located in Indianapolis. Now, one thing that Jim Jones was passionate about was integration and equality. One activity he would do quite often is gathering the members of his church and go to local white-only restaurants and shops and protest outside the businesses until the shop owners agreed to serve all races. Now, Jim stated that he would bring these businesses hundreds of customers and hundreds of dollars, and you would think the owners would use common sense and realize if they were only serving white people that they're cutting out their dollar by not serving a big portion of the community and just serve all races. But during this time, the hatred for black people was so strong that they were willing to cut off their own money to prove a point. Like, I know I can make more money with you, but I hate black people. So when these businesses finally opened up the doors to serve black people, they were like, "Oh my God, we are making so much more money now." And they would tell other business owners like, "Hey, if you start serving the blacks over there, I'm telling you, you gonna make some money. I was making this much, then now I'm making this much." And the other owners were like, "Wow, the black people have money to spend. Who knew? I guess we could let them in." Now, the business owners, for the most part, were not on the same mission to serve black people for the greater good of equality, but for the sake of upping their revenue. But Jim Jones was happy that his congregation can now mix and mingle outside of the church and feel safe. So like after church, you want to go get lunch? Well, guess what? This restaurant now serves all people. He enjoyed this so much so that he would make flyers of the list of businesses that allow integration and pass it around the congregation of the church to let his people know where they can safely enjoy themselves and shop outside of the church. And doing this will only bring in more people to the businesses, causing them to make even more money, because now the business owners are like, "Oh my God, Jim Jones is bringing over his congregation. We're making so much money. Let me go see what he doing over at his church. Oh, he performing miracles. Now let me put the money I just made from his congregation back into his collection plate." So it was just like one big marketing cycle. So it seems like Jim Jones is on a good mission of equality. He is for the people. He's actually doing things in the community. But by the mid-1960s, Jones and the People's Temple now faced increased scrutiny and criticism in Indianapolis. So Jim Jones felt it was best to move the church once again, but this time to California, due to cities like San Francisco at the time that was known for its progressive and liberal political climate. Jones believed this environment would be more supportive of his social justice goals and racially integrated congregation. So Jim Jones, of course, needs a new location for his church so his people can safely fill up his congregation without facing scrutiny for the community. But he's also thinking like, wow, first Indiana, now California, I'm getting real popular. So let's get into Jim and his wife Marceline. They had 4 children at the the time, 1 biological and 3 adopted. The 3 adopted children were of different races, creating what he referred to as his rainbow family, including children of Korean, Native American, and African American descent. These adoptions were part of his broader strategy to align his personal life with his public advocacy for racial integration and social justice. However, Jim wasn't paying much attention to the kids like that. He left his wife to raise them, which wasn't out of the ordinary during this time. It wasn't until Jim Jones pulled the ultimate pastor move that pissed his wife off. Guess what he did? Exactly. Sleeping with members of his congregation. He's officially a pastor. That's your last training. Once you sleep with your congregation, you are a pastor. So this caused even more rift in the marriage, and Marceline began to feel trapped and didn't like that Jim wasn't practicing what he preached. But he justified his cheating by saying, listen, it's just sex. Nothing more, nothing less. His wife Marceline was bedridden at times and couldn't satisfy him as often due to her continuous back pain, which I don't know why he didn't perform a miracle on her, right? Okay. So he was like, these women are just giving me sexual needs right now. They can't replace you, girl. You my wife. And he felt so confident in what he was saying, and he didn't want to get caught in the act. So he confessed to the church and told them what was going on. But he wrapped it up in a beautiful bow that was easily digestible by his congregation. He said, listen, this is all a part of the mission. You see that girl right there? And that girl, and that girl, and that girl, and that one over there, and that girl too. They are all providing me emotional support at this time, because as a man of the word, I have to continuously preach to you all, and it can be draining. So I need you all sometimes to fuel me, to fill my cup. And the members of the church are like, yes, pastor, let them use ya. Just feeding right into the BS. They were just captivated by this man, which is why when Jim Jones initially moved his church to California, about 60 members from his church in Indianapolis decided to up and move to follow him, which is a lot, because I don't know anybody, like if a church were to move to a completely different state, who would move with the church rather than just finding another church home in the area. But you will see people followed him even outside the country a little bit later. Like for me, I don't think a church can be that good where I'm going to move and have to find a new job, a new place to live, make new friends for a church. I mean, but that's me. I'm a heathen, right? Okay. The People's Church also did work in the community. They did food drives, clothes donations to the less fortunate, and also let's go into these clothes donations, because like I said before, with the whole cycle of let my people eat at your restaurant, now you're so impressed by the money you're making that you're going to come to my congregation and give me the money that you made from your restaurant. Jim Jones is very good with cycles and making sure the money continuously revolved around him. So with these clothes donations, and honestly I was a little impressed by this, he would have members of his church donate clothes or supplies that they were no longer using, and then he opened up his own store at the church reselling the used items to the community. So he basically had his own little Goodwill. And on top of that, when members would come to the church, if they were to bring a friend, new members, visitors, they all had to fill out this form with their name and address, and he would use that as marketing material to send out pamphlets to everyone of upcoming events, how many miracles were performed the week before, because remember, he is still on this I Perform Miracles tour. Like literally, he was on a I Perform Miracles tour. He brought a bunch of buses and took members of his church to different states to visit churches and perform these staged miracles. So again, he would have his friends, and his friends would be like, oh my gosh, I feel dizzy. Oh, now I don't anymore because Jim Jones waved his magical wand, and due to the power of Jim Jones, I am healed. With his own personal goodwill, it will also employ members of the church as well, especially the African American members who were not able to find jobs due to, of course, racial inequality. He would hire them at the church to work the store. So people were like, oh my gosh, he's really about his word. He's helping us out. He's helping us make money. He's giving us the word. All praises to Jim Jones. The church even developed a scholarship program for unserved youth to go to college, and they purchased houses, remodeled them into dorms so that the individuals that received the scholarships to go to college also had a dorm as well. And during this time, you had the Black Panther doing their thing, but also in the same breath, people would mention Jim Jones because his efforts in the Black community were so grand that people were like, oh my gosh, he is carrying out MLK's dream. Because there was a lot of racial divides, the Vietnam War just ended, there was a lot of protests and riots taking place, so many people looked to Jim Jones as a safety net to develop their own society, and that's where the People's Temple people became the example of what many people wanted society to be. Jim Jones also had a very clever way of planting seeds into his congregation as well, indirectly but directly letting them know that racists were trying to shut down the church and to stop his mission. Therefore, his congregation started this plan where the mission was, if you don't agree with us, we're going to convince you, and if we can't convince you, you're the enemy. Now, over time, Jim Jones started to get a lot more controlling, wanting his followers to only spend time focused on him and the church. Like, you took your family out to get a milkshake at the restaurant we protested in front of that you would be allowed to get a milkshake, but how dare you go get a milkshake at the restaurant that we protested at and not give that money directly to me? Like, I know I fought for you to drink at that restaurant, but now you really drinking at that restaurant? That little $2.99 could have been in the collection plate. Now look at you. And people are like, yes, I'm drinking a milkshake at a restaurant that I was marching in front of for an hour saying no justice, no peace, so they could serve me a strawberry milkshake, whipped cream with a cherry on top. And along with that, one of the rules of the congregation, no matter how integrated it is some limits. You could come in as a couple. That's fine. Okay, you bringing your mate in, that's cool. But don't think you're about to meet the man of your dreams in my congregation. Because if you're meeting the man of your dreams, that means you're focused on him during service and not me. And if you're trying to meet you a nice, sweet little lady, you should be watching me and idolizing me as a man, not looking for a little tenderoni in my congregation. How dare you not just be focused on me the whole time? So basically, no flirting or fraternizing with people of the congregation, because it's going to distract you from my words. And I'm putting on a performance. It's all about me. So focus on me. Focus on me. He would just tell his followers to do stuff and they would just do it. No questions asked. Of course, over time, some people were able to peep that he was a little crazy ahead of time, so they left. But majority of the people stayed. And it seemed like once he realized he had that type of control, he kept it going. Speaking of going, Jim wanted to keep going. He wanted to keep his energy up during the day, all day, so he could stay going. But then he also wanted to be able to sleep at night, which was done by him having access to certain drugs, thanks to members of his congregation. I guess whoever was a pharmacist gave whatever pills that he wanted or whatever drugs that he wanted to keep him going throughout the day. I'm sure you guys know what drug does that, which caused him to be short-tempered and irritable because he's constantly operating on chemicals. And these chemicals cause his eyes to be red and watery all the time, which led to his signature look of wearing dark sunglasses all the time to hide what was going on. But the sunglasses couldn't cover up the fact that the drugs were making him more mean, more controlling, and more paranoid. He would go on these hour-long sermons about how the FBI and the government were tapping into the phone lines of the church and keeping a close eye on the members of the church to see what they were doing even outside of church. Everyone should be on alert because they out for us, which made the congregation scared and paranoid just like him. So he was raising little mini Jim Jones. So he said, it's best if you guys stay close to me and my wife because we're going to protect you. They're not going to touch you long as I'm here. And people of his congregation looked at him so much as a leader that they called him and his wife mom and dad. Not pastor and first lady, but mom and dad. And that just showed how much control he had over his followers. And that control got to his head even more because it got to the point where Jim was having relations with the majority of the women in his congregation. They all knew about each other. And he thought that all women out in the world and in his congregation were attracted to him. Like, how dare you not want me? I'm everybody type. I'm Jim Jones. So with the increase of paranoia that was going on in the church, Jim felt it was time to find a promised land for his congregation. Like, all right, I'm done bouncing you guys around. It's time we have a promised land, the land of milk and honey, or the land of Jim and Jones. Somewhere where we can exercise peaceful integration and community service and for y'all to continue following me. But instead of trying to force that to take place in California, let's build our own community elsewhere. October 1973, Guyana, South America became the location of the promised land, so him, Jim Jones, and his members can avoid American martial law and concentration camps that would soon be taking over. So he says, the exact spot where the temple would be built was basically a jungle. No connecting roads in a place where the population was around 850,000, but they lived along the Atlantic coast out the way, and it would be hard to get access to him and his people, but the perfect spot for boats to come in with the goods, so that would be leaving from Miami, Florida to the capital of Guyana, Jonestown, which was a port city. So members of his church were all about, like, you know what? Jim Jones is going to create us a promised land. This man is really about it. Not only is he trying to protect us in the church, but he about to build us a whole community. So some members of the church came over to Guyana to help knock down trees because it was literally a jungle. So they came over to help knock down trees, build the church, build different cottages, whatever was needed to build a self-sufficient community. So during this process, Jim Jones, with his marketing, is advertising this new promised land to his congregation like, hey, it's looking good over there. I don't want to brag, but the cottages is looking real nice and comfortable. I know I don't want to pressure y'all to go over there. But if you want peace and harmony and to live without worrying about when the FBI is going to attack you, I suggest you come on over there. No pressure, but they're going to attack you here. I suggest if you want to come over, you start saving your money now, okay? So the members of the church got it done. And in 1977, Jonestown, right, was ready to be populated. So surprisingly, Jim Jones did not put that much pressure on the members of his congregation to move over to Jonestown. It was completely up to them whether they wanted to move or not, and a good majority actually did. Over time, over 900 members of the People's Temple moved to Jonestown, Guyana over the course of his development from 1974 until 1978. Now, the first group of settlers were those who helped clear the land and build the infrastructure for Jonestown, and early reports were overall positive, highlighting the community's progress in agriculture and construction. By 1976, more members of the People's Temple moved from the United States to Jonestown. So many people moved that they actually had to build more cottages to house everyone, and this did lead to a lack of necessities for individuals. Despite initial optimism, the reality of life in Jonestown included hard labor, lack of food, poor living conditions, and the tropical climate only made matters worse. Jim Jones' control over the community became more strict. He implemented harsh rules, conducted loyalty tests, and punished people who failed. And we'll get more into these loyalty tests a little later. Upon arrival, he even took the passports of the members so they wouldn't try to escape. Members' movements and communication with the outside world were tightly monitored. Individuals of the Jonestown community could not even write letters without it being pre-read first to see what they were telling outside people, to keep operations tight-knit and hushed. So basically, if you're about to write a letter to your mom and your dad and you're just in the letter just explaining what's going on, he would read it first and be like, why you told him you was hungry on Tuesday? That make it look like we ain't got no food here. I know you don't have food here, but still, don't tell them that. Rewrite it and try again. Or they would get punished for saying too much. There were some temple members who managed to escape Jonestown and shared stories of the oppressive conditions, further fueling the media and public concern. Jones responded by increasing security and surveillance because he's seen how the media in America was covering stories of Jonestown, and he was overall trying to prove a point that he created this utopia for individuals and wanted more people to come over, but he couldn't do it if everything on the news was negative due to people escaping and leaking information. The way Jonestown was able to semi-maintain itself was by the social security checks of the individuals who had to hand them over that lived in Jonestown. So whatever social security check they were getting in America, they had to get it mailed over to Jonestown so he could take all their money and delegate the funds wherever he seen fit, but there weren't enough funds coming in to properly maintain the community for members to live comfortably, which led to a lack of food and clean water. Even the water they showered in was polluted. They had to shower with their mouth closed so they wouldn't ingest the water. That's how toxic it was. So while the members of the People's Temple living in Jonestown was having to deal with a bunch of lack, Jim Jones himself and his wife had the best built cottage, fresh water, a generator to maintain his refrigerator, so he had fresh and cold food, and even had fans to make sure the temperature in his cabin was cool when everyone else didn't have access to nearly something as nice. Now, Jonestown was not always like this. According to Jim Jones's son, who also lived in Jonestown, he stated before his dad arrived, the atmosphere of Jonestown was the utopia that he initially described that it would be. He was making friends. They were able to come together to commune. They were having a good time building the cottages. They were just having fun building bonds, and it felt safe over there and peaceful. It was not until his dad, Jim Jones, arrived that everything revolved around him. He would host meetings almost every single night. He would talk for hours at a time, and he even had an intercom in his cabin where he would speak on the loudspeaker all day to everyone, making these random announcements as if he just wanted to hear his own voice. He did not like when people of Jonestown would get into relationships, of course, just like in his congregation, and because he felt like that was an opportunity for individuals to commiserate and go against him, and and he even tried to break up family dynamics so he wouldn't be outnumbered. If one of them tried to run away or come up with a plan, they were all against each other, so it would be every man for themselves, causing him to continue on as the leader. So he would make sure he would break up the family, like, okay, I need to put mom and dad against each other, so if one decided to leave, at least one of them going to stay, so that's one more person I have access to. But if they're all together, that means 4 people are about to leave when I could keep at least 2 or 3 of them. It seems like each day Jim Jones would become harsher and crueler. He was very condescending, calling his people of his community out of their names. Abuse began to happen, and even drugging some of the members of Jonestown. Sedatives and tranquilizers were used to subdue those who might resist or question his authority, keeping them docile and more controllable. Basically, not keeping the members in their right mind would give Jim Jones more access to control their minds. These harsh living conditions were going on for a few years. It went from Jim Jones not pressuring people to come over to people who decided to come over had to stay there. So he went from come on over if you want to now you can't go anywhere, you have to stay here. So with these people randomly deciding to up and move to Jonestown, they still had relatives in North America that grew concerned about what was going on over there. Because like I said before, they had limited access to the outside world, so people's siblings and parents and friends wanted to know what they were doing over there and why they decided to follow a strange man to a completely different country. And this is where the media stepped in to investigate. In 1978, the U.S. began exposing allegations of abuse, financial exploitation, and mistreatment with the People's Temple. This increased public and government scrutiny of Jonestown and his organization. And this eventually led to Congressman Leo Ryan in 1978 paid Jonestown a visit to investigate the allegations of abuse and to help those who wanted to leave. Once Jim Jones got the word that the congressman was coming in, Jim Jones used this as an excuse to be like, I told you. Remember I told y'all the CIA, the FBI, the government is out to get us? Now look, now they're about to come over here. I told you they were on their way. They're trying to keep an eye on us. They're about to come and attack us. So for a while, Jim Jones and the people of Jonestown didn't even give the congressman and his people permission to land the plane that they were coming in on. And when they spent the night in the area, they had to stay off the premise of Jonestown somewhere else. But eventually they let them in. I guess he had to create a cover-up first before he caught him off guard and red-handed. So he needed to make sure everybody was acting right before the congressman came over, so he wouldn't get in any type of trouble. And he used this as a way to prep for an attack, like war was about to happen. Bring in guns, up the security. If anybody act like they don't want to be here or they try to leave, kill them. Now the visit from Leo Ryan is really what was the final straw for Jim Jones. His cover was being blown right before his eyes. In November 1978, Leo Ryan embarked on a fact-finding mission to Jonestown, Guyana, occupied by a delegation that included journalists, cameramen, photographers, story writers, and concerned relatives of people at the temple. The visit was prompted by growing concern of reports of abuse within the isolated community led by Jim Jones. Upon arrival, Congressman Ryan and his delegation were initially greeted warmly by Jones and the residents of Jonestown, who staged a performance to showcase the community's supposed contentment. So the members of Jonestown put on a full performance for the congressman, singing and dancing and showing him what a good time on a regular day that they were having, and how welcome he is, and trying to prove that there is nothing to hide. So initially he was like, wow, I see you guys are having a good time. I see there's no need for concern. Thank you for the warm welcome.
I think that all of you know that I'm here to find out more about questions that have been raised about your operation here. But I can tell you right now that from the few conversations I've had with some of the folks here already this evening, that whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
But little did he know that they were faking the entire time, and they were forced to smile and clap and chuck and jive to make it seem like nothing was wrong, again adding to the Jim Jones cover-up. A member of Jonestown that ended up escaping stated that he was told to smile and clap and have a good time and don't speak to any of the staff or crew or the people that came in visiting directly. So no one was allowed to speak to them directly, and if anyone was caught talking to them, Jim Jones would be around hovering over them to make sure that they didn't say anything out of pocket. However, there was one person who took this as their way to plead for help. One NBC reporter by the name of Don Harris was slipped a note by a temple member named Vernon The note contained a plea for help and indicated that Vernon and another Temple member named Monica wished to leave Jonestown. This note was a pivotal moment during the visit, and it highlighted the growing discontent and desire among some members to escape the oppressive conditions in Jonestown. Now, Don Harris, the NBC reporter who received the note, was deeply moved by the note and the desperate plea for help it contained. Don Harris was committed to uncovering the truth behind the allegations of abuse, so much so that he decided to go back to Jonestown because, like I said, they had to stay off the premise. So once they were done with the investigation, they put on a performance, everything seemed all happy-go-lucky. He was like, no, we got to go back because this note just is something off. So he decided to go back and interview Jim Jones and ask him about the note. Like, hey, I know you guys put on a nice show, but I was slipped this note when we were leaving. Can you explain this? Jim Jones looked at the letter and he began to once again cover up his act, stating, well, if they wanted to leave, they can just leave. No one's being kept here against their will. And why would they even have their kid here? Like, they want to go, they can go.
Right. Someone came and passed me this note.
He's the one that I'm just talking about. Yeah, this is the man that wants to leave his son here.
Doesn't it concern you, though, that this man, for whatever reason, one of the people in your group...
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about liars? Are you people going to leave us? I just beg you, please leave us. Bill, we will bother nobody. Anybody wants to get out of here can get out of here. We have no problem about getting out of here. They come and go all the time. I don't know what kind of game. People like people like publicity. Some people do. I don't. But some people like publicity. But if it's so damn bad, why is he leaving his son here? Can you give me a good reason for that?
So Jim Jones stating if anyone wants to leave, they can leave. All hell broke loose, and more people began to throw their clothes in suitcases, and they were given bins to put their stuff in, and they began to haul ass up out of there. So Jim Jones thought he was just saying something like, oh, if they want to leave, they can leave. He was not expecting people to actually leave. Then he began to say, oh, you can't leave. You're my people. You're betraying me. Basically trying to gaslight them and make them feel bad. Like, you're leaving me? We're having such a good time. Why you want to leave? So while people are still leaving despite him begging and pleading, Congressman Ryan stayed behind because there were so many people that wanted to leave. He decided, you know what, I'm going to stay behind, let them fill up the first plane. I'll wait on the second plane that's coming to make room for the people trying to escape. In total, 30 people, including staff and families, were trying to leave. So Congressman Ryan is still there and is still in the same proximity of Jim Jones underneath the pavilion in Jonestown. Then all of a sudden, a Jonestown member walks up to Congressman Ryan and say, all right, mother, you're going to die, and stabs him. So immediately the people with Congressman Ryan began to jump the guy to protect the congressman, and Congressman Ryan was escorted out and he was walked safely to the next plane. You can see him walking with a blood-stained shirt from the injury. There was a reporter who wanted to interview the congressman about the stabbing right in front of the plane, waiting to take him away and other Jonestown members who were escaping. So while Congressman Ryan and his group of reporters, cameramen, sound crew prepared to depart from the Port Katuma airstrip, they were ambushed by armed members of the People's Temple on a tractor trailer known as the Red Brigade, who were abiding by Jim Jones' orders, and shot and killed the congressman, killed other members of his group, the NBC cameraman Bob Brown, Don Harris, the NBC correspondent, Patricia Parks, one of the defectors, and Greg Robinson, a photographer with the San Francisco Examiner, and 12 others were either shot or injured trying to find protection from being shot. When the shooting was over, the people who survived were trying to bring in the people who have been shot and injured, and the plane that was supposed to take them away just took off. Pilots were like, bump this, I'm gone, every man for themselves, we got to get out of here. So now the people who weren't on the plane that were stranded in Jonestown were just stranded. Some members ran and escaped inside the jungle and were able to find somewhat of safety. Some played dead to avoid being shot. So once word got back to Jonestown that the congressman was dead, Jim Jones warned the members of People's Temple, hey, the congressman is dead. You think they're going to let us get away with this? They'll torture our children. They'll torture our seniors. If we can't live in peace, then let's die in peace. We are not committing suicide. We are committing a revolutionary act. And the crowd began to cheer. And I was wondering, why were these people, these members, so comfortable with dying? And it's because they actually had practice with this. Jim Jones will host these events, we will call them, called the White Nights. White Nights were rehearsals for mass suicide conducted by Jim Jones and the leadership of the People's Temple in Jonestown. These drills were intended to test the loyalty of temple members and prepare them for the possibility of a collective suicide as a response to perceived threats or external pressure. The term White Night was used by Jones to describe these extreme loyalty tests, which he framed as exercises in revolutionary suicide. During a White Night, Jones will often fabricate a crisis, such as claiming that the community was under attack from external forces like the CIA or other enemies. Members were sometimes given a drink, which they were told contained poison, and instructed to consume it as an act of defiance against their enemies. The drink would typically be harmless, but the members were not informed of this until after they consumed it. So he would just watch them just to see if they would drink it, then be like, okay, now you good, you won, you loyal. But those that did not pass the loyalty test were punished. November 18th, 1978, the final White Night was not a drill, but the actual mass murder-suicide that resulted in the deaths of over 900 People Temple's members. Following the murder of Congressman Leo Ryan and others at the Port Katuma airstrip, Jim Jones ordered his followers to commit a revolutionary suicide by drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. Jim Jones decided to use a cyanide-laced drink to poison the members of the People's Temple during the Jonestown Massacre. While it was often referred to as Kool-Aid, the actual drink was Flavorade. The choice of using a powdered drink mix was influenced by several factors. One, a powdered drink mix like Flavorade allowed for the cyanide to easily be dissolved and distributed among a large number of people quickly, efficiently, and affordably. This was practical for orchestrating a mass poisoning event. Mixing the cyanide with the flavored drink helped mask the bitter taste of the poison, making it more likely that the members would consume it without immediate suspicion or resistance. And during the White Night rehearsals, Jones had conditioned members to drink what they believed to be poison in similar scenarios. Using a familiar drink mix reinforced the ritual they had practiced, reintroducing the likelihood of panic and resistance. On the day of the mass suicide, large buckets of Flavorade were prepared and laced with cyanide, along with other sedatives and tranquilizers. The drinks were distributed to the members of Jonestown in a highly organized manner. Parents were instructed to give the poisoned drink to their children first before consuming it themselves. While many drank willingly due to fear, loyalty, or resignation, others were forced to consume the poison either by armed guards or through injection if they resisted. Now, before this tragic ending, Jim Jones decided to do one more snub to the United States to prove his point in disappointment with how he was treated. In a final snub to the USA, Jim Jones donated the cult's money to the Soviet Union. He sent one of his members by the name of Tim Carter to the Soviet embassy in Georgetown with 3 suitcases full of cash. Now, one fact about Tim Carter, he was the last person alive who was at Jonestown in the midst of people being murdered. So while he was sent off on a mission to give the money to the Soviet Union, people around him were dying of poisoning, including his wife and child. Now, for the individuals that survived the ambush attack on the airstrip, local Guyanese authorities and residents provided initial aid and secured the area. An emergency message was sent to the U.S. Embassy in Georgetown, prompting a coordinated response. On November 19, 1978, a date after the mass suicide, a U.S. Air Force plane arrived and military medical personnel provided urgent care, evacuating the critically injured to Georgetown and subsequently to the United States for advanced treatment. The bodies of those killed were also recovered. This prompt response and the coordinated rescue efforts ensured the survivors' safety and facilitated a subsequent investigation into the tragic events. When the U.S. military and other authorities arrived at Jonestown in the days following the massacre, they encountered a scene of unimaginable horror. Initially estimating around 400 to 500 deaths, they soon discovered the true extent of the tragedy. They found many bodies stacked on top of each other, with over 300 children among the adults. The final death toll was confirmed at 918. 153 men, 452 women, and 2 bodies that were unidentified. Due to the tropical climate being accelerated, the decomposition of the bodies made the identification and counting process deeply distressing. Evidence indicated that while most victims died from ingesting cyanide-laced Flavorade, some were forcibly injected with poisoning, suggesting that not all the deaths were voluntary and that there were signs of struggle and force. The victims of the massacre are buried in a mass grave in Oakland, California. A few survivors who had hidden in the jungle or within Jonestown were also found and provided crucial testimonies about the oppressive conditions and events leading up to the massacre. One being Jim Jones' son, Jim Jones Jr., who was not in Jonestown during the Massacre because he was in Georgetown, Guyana as part of the Temple's basketball team. He reflects on the profound scenes of loss and betrayal he felt upon learning the tragedy of his father and the role in it, and even admitted to hating his father for his actions to his followers and his own mother. He became rebellious, and Jim Jones feared that if people seen his own son was rebelling, that they may do the same thing, and even to this day he has extreme regret that he wasn't there to try to stop him from harming the people he built a relationship with and considered friends and family. If you want to see video footage and hear from survivors, there is a Hulu series titled Cult Massacre: One Day in Jonestown that uncovers more about this tragic event and includes footage that I can't show on YouTube and statements from survivors that are a little too graphic for this platform, more graphic than I already shared. This tragedy underscores the devastating consequences of psychological manipulation and force control within cult-like environments. It serves as a cautionary tale emphasizing the importance of critical thinking, skepticism, and resisting the allure of charismatic figures who prey on vulnerability. The phrase drinking the Kool-Aid has since become synonymous with surrendering one's autonomy and judgment to harmful ideologies or leaders, highlighting the enduring relevance of learning from history to prevent such tragedies from reoccurring. The Jonestown Massacre was known as the largest mass suicide in American history, and today is now recognized as a mass murder. Thank you all for tuning into this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.